All right. Hello. Let's I'm just going to see if we're up and running correctly. Let's see if I can.
Up and running correctly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we're running fine. Speaking to nobody at the moment, but it's fine. We're just going to run through this because yesterday morning I finished right over here. I finished A Dance with Dragons. You know, book 5 of A Song of Ice and Fire. And, of course, I enjoyed it. It took me a few years to get through these books. I read a Game of Thrones in high school, which, looking back, seems like a very long time. And I'm a pretty slow reader, and I take very long breaks. So, it took me a few years to get through them, but I still love this series. I'm hoping to go through it again, hopefully a few more times, because they're that good. So I decided I wanted to sit down because I wanted to throw my hat into the community and talk about the books for a little bit because they're, like I said, very good, and there's a reason for that. So, similar to a few other series that I like a lot, like One Piece comes to mind. The reason I like stories like this is because they have this huge interconnected world that feels alive, even outside of the characters. You're getting a very limited view of the world, and the world's always moving outside of the characters. And that happens in One Piece, and it happens here in A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, in One Piece, you get scenes of multiple characters together. You know, it's a manga, so you're getting more drawn out things. You're getting views of every character, dialogue from everyone. In A Song of Ice and Fire, you're getting the point of view of the character. You're seeing the dialogue they have between characters. You're seeing things that they overhear, things that they notice people doing. You get their inner thoughts. You learn about their dreams. So you get a closer interaction with the characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, and I think that's something that makes it important. Um, so that's what I like about the series, but what do I dislike? And one thing I dislike, and it might be a little bit nitpicky, but it has to be George's writing, which I don't think is bad writing. It's very good writing, and it's incredible in its storytelling ability, the way he uses foreshadowing, his prose, the way sentences flow, his chapters, how they're laid out, the way he lays out the book, the timeline. It's very smart, it's very meticulous, and it's something I really enjoy diving into and uncovering. Um, but it's hard to get into. When I bought a Game of Thrones, the first book was hard for me to read, and not that it was like difficult, that it had difficult words. It's just the way it was written. It took me a few tries. Like, I got bored probably twice on the bus ride back from the trip we were on when I bought the book. um, and then later on I ended up getting through the prologue, and then right when I got through the prologue, that's really when I started to get used to his writing style, and it just clicked for me. It was really easy to start getting through everything else. Of course, you have Bran 1 right there, right after the prologue, so um, there's like an ease of change between characters that I really like. George's first sentences really set up the scene really well. You really get a sense of what's going on in most of them. Um, yeah, so I don't know what to move on to next, so I guess we can just start by talking about the first book, A Game of Thrones, which I read in high school, like I said earlier. A Game of Thrones, if you've watched the TV show adaptation, is actually pretty close to that. The first season follows it pretty well. There's a few story beats that are, of course, more drawn out in the books. You get a lot more detail. A few things are different here and there. And the show actually adds a few things that are really good. You get the scene between Cersei and Robert, where he's telling her, you know, 5 armies versus 1. So, you know, he says, like, a good army will always win when he's talking about the danger that Daenerys is posing. That's a really good scene that they added to the show. But for the most part, like I said, follows the book pretty closely. But if we're going to start talking about the book, of course we got to start talking about the prologue, which I said was hard to get into. And jumping right into the prologue, you run into what I'm talking about. Because the thing that got me when I started reading George's writing is that he names, like, almost everybody in the scene with a full name. And it didn't take me until probably A Dance with Dragons that I noticed that there's appendixes at the end of the book that name, like, important people. Like here at the end of my copy of A Game of Thrones, you get everybody associated with House Baratheon, and you get a little bit of lore associated with the house. I don't know if this came with the original copies of the book. I have not looked into that, but it's a pretty good resource to have if you get lost while reading it. It's something I wish that I looked into when I first started reading it, but when you jump into it, you kind of get used to it, and then you get the utility of reading the later books, and you start to realize that, oh, these characters that are with these other characters keep appearing. Like Sir Axel Florent, you know, he's with Stannis, he shows up in A Clash of Kings, and he's there at the wall with Stannis in A Dance with Dragons. So it's pretty easy to pick up those names when you get into the thick of it. But the prologue's character, the point of view is with Will. From what I remember, it's with Sir Waymar Royce, and I believe the Royces are from the Vale of Arryn, and House Royce, I believe, is either Andal or First Men. They're descendants of one of those, but they're the ones that wear kind of like bronze armor. Of course, Sir Wilmar Royce in this scene, he's not wearing that armor. He's wearing the black, the Night's Watch colors. And they're ranging beyond the wall looking for wildlings. And wildlings are these people that live beyond this giant 800-foot wall on this fictional continent that was raised there 8,000 years ago or so. It was built to withstand these fictional creatures called the Others, which attacked this land 8,000 years ago. Not just this continent, but a continent across a sea, which you can see here. Let's pull it up. It's called the Narrow Sea, and it's separated from this continent called ASOS, which is mainly where one of the main characters of the first book travels, Daenerys, if you're familiar with the books. But our story starts actually north of here. Now this is the wall. It covers here. As you can see, it's the northernmost part of the continent. So the wildlings are from here beyond the wall. This right here is White Tree. It's kind of a town that wildlings live at, sort of. But by the time our point of view character gets there, it's completely empty. There's nobody there. Beyond that is Craster's Keep, which we don't visit until, I believe, A Clash of Kings. The Fist of the First Men, I believe we get there in A Clash of Kings, and I think it gets attacked in Storm. But the others are from somewhere beyond here. Nobody knows where they're from. And we're not really sure how far Sir Waymar Royce and Will and our point of view character are ranging beyond the wall. But they're looking for wildlings. They can't be that far from Castle Black. But our point of view character kind of wants to get out of there because, he notices things aren't right with the wildlings. And of course, they get attacked by the others. One thing that I like about this opening prologue scene is that it starts with magic. And it's interesting because the magic is scary. It's not scary to read for me necessarily, but it's definitely got horror aspects to it, which I enjoyed reading. The others, the way they're described, it's very queer and eerie. So the book starts out strong with magic, and you can't get used to it because you don't see it for the rest of the book. It completely goes away. So it kind of leaves you wondering, like, where did all of that go? Like, what are these creatures from beyond the wall that attack these men? And you're going to find out pretty quick that we're not going to really find out what happened to him. Or what happened with the others. Because the only survivor of this attack by the others is being executed in the next chapter. So even though Bran is the POV character of the next chapter where I believe Garrett is being executed by Ned Stark, I think I'm going to just go in a list and now just talk about the characters in order and what I like about their stories, what I think about their choices that they made on their way to the Iron Throne or wherever they're at in the story. So, of course, if we're going to talk about a Game of Thrones, we got to start with Eddard Stark. So, this right here is the path that Eddard Stark takes in a Game of Thrones. He basically just goes from Winterfell to King's Landing. And of course, he meets his fate at the very end of the book. So what is interesting about Eddard Stark? Well, the most interesting thing is that he doesn't catch a break in this book. He's losing a lot of sleep. He's super stressed out. There's a lot of things that are going on that he wants to get to the bottom to. He's trying to do his responsibility as Hand of the King, while also dealing with the kind of catastrophe that's always happening around him. At first he's dealing with Robert. When he gets to King Landing, he deals with Robert, of course. After Robert's injured and he's injured, he ends up sending Beric Dondarrion to hunt down the mountain because of the mess that Catelyn causes by kidnapping Tyrion, which, of course, sends Tywin to wreak havoc on the Riverlands, which is... The Riverlands never get a break. They're right in the middle of Westeros. They always get fucked in every war. It's pretty sad, but yeah, you're going to see a lot of that in A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords. You're going to see a lot of that from Arya's point of view and from Jaime's point of view and Brienne, because they all spend a lot of time here. You see stuff from Catelyn, but I don't know if you see a lot of brutality of what's happening to normal peasants, common people living in Westeros. But you definitely see a lot of that in Arya's chapters. Yeah, but back to Ned. I forgot why I even brought up Riverrun. Or the Riverlands, but yeah, they always get fucked in every war. Oh, because he sends Beric Dondarrion, of course. So, like I said, what I liked about Ned was that he deals with a lot of these stressors, but he's always working to do the right thing. He's a very honorable man. It's kind of part of his character. Other people bring it up all the time. But the thing is that honor also gets him killed. He works to do the right thing, and he makes mistakes doing that. He warns Cersei to, protect her children because he believes that Robert's going to kill her children, because he's going to tell Robert the truth no matter what, because that's what he has to do. And of course, the truth is that all of Robert's children are bastards of Jaime and Cersei's incest relationship. So they're bastards of incest. So Ned, of course, has to do the right thing, and he tells her. And, of course, that's what gets him killed. It gets him thrown in jail, and eventually beheaded by Joffrey. Now, there's a lot of things that lead to that, but Ned consistently makes mistakes along the way by doing the right thing. Of course, trying to bring justice to Gregor Clegane is the right thing to do, but in Robert's absence, did he make the right call? But he was of course being provoked, so it's a weird call to make, but I respect Ned for making the right decision. Another thing that's big with Ned is his promise to his sister, who of course died before the story begins in Robert's rebellion. Of course, if you're familiar with the books, you know that Robert's rebellion was started by the capture of Lyanna Stark by Robert Baratheon, or by Rhaegar Targaryen, in what is believed to be a kidnapping, and of course, not only that, but of course the death of Rickard Stark and Brandon Stark by the Mad King Aerys via wildfire and, I believe, strangulation. So that happens, and Aerys sends a word to the Eyrie. Jon Arryn, of course, is in the Eyrie, to bring not only Ned Stark, but also Robert Baratheon to court to answer for their father's crimes. Jon Arryn says no. They all raise their banners. I believe Robert goes to Storm's End, or he sends Stannis to Storm's End. But I know that Ned goes north to rally the banners. He stops here at these islands called the Three Sisters, and of course makes his way to Winterfell, raises the banners, and of course they come down. And I believe there's fights here, of course, in the Riverlands. And they eventually fight at the Trident, and Robert kills Rhaegar Targaryen. Ned goes to look for Lyanna and finds her at, if I can find it, the Tower of Joy, right here in southern Westeros near the border of Dorne. He finds her there. Of course, she passes away there, and he has to return north. And that's before this whole story begins. Anyways. I forgot where I was going, but we're just going to keep rolling with it, boys. This is Off the Couth. I don't know if there's much else I can say about Ned. I was trying to make a point there, but a lot of the things about the promise that he made to his sister, there's just a lot of questions to be raised there. And of course, people found out, or believed to have found out, it's basically confirmed, what that secret actually is, all the way back from when this book was first published. It's pretty wild, but if you believe who Jon's parentage is believed to be, then you know that people have believed in this theory for a very, very long time. And that's, of course, that Robert's Rebellion was based on a lie, that it was actually Lyanna Stark falling in love with Rhaegar Targaryen, probably at the tourney at Harrenhal, that brought about this warfare, this bloodshed, the death of Rhaegar Targaryen, and the death of the Targaryen dynasty in Westeros. Of course, Viserys and Daenerys escape and exile across the sea to, I believe, Braavos, for a while, and then of course they end up in Pentos at the beginning of A Game of Thrones. That's where they are. So, of course, Ned is the big twist of the book. He has the most chapters, with 15 chapters. So he's kind of the main character, even though it doesn't necessarily start with him. He is, in essence, the character that you view the story through the most. And it comes as a big surprise that he dies. Even if you've seen the show and stuff, like, you read the book and you start to notice the mistakes that Ned makes that I talked about earlier, his honorable side. And of course there's a few other characters that come into play with that, like Sansa, which we'll get into later when we talk about her role in this book. But yeah, overall Ned, he's a really great character, and of course his loss is felt immediately after. Like, where you think the story's gonna go, it turns around in a completely separate direction. When I first read this, it was before I had seen the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones. I thought that Ned was going to be sent to the Wall, because it seemed that was the deal that Varys had given him if he pleaded guilty. So I believed that Ned was going to go to the Wall. So he, when of course you see his execution, I went back to HBO and I looked through the episodes, and I went to the episode 9 and I scrolled through, and of course it happened in the show too. Ned is dead. And I couldn't believe it. So of course comes as a huge shock. I didn't get that for the big twist in A Storm of Swords. I had seen season 3 and 4 before I even read A Storm of Swords, so all the twists in that one, I got all the twists for all of them. I got that the show spoiled. So A Game of Thrones is really the only one that I read with a blind eye, without knowing too much about the universe and stuff. So it was actually a really great read. So overall, yep, Ned, good character, but he failed. He failed and he died for trying to be the right dude. So the next character to talk about is Catelyn Stark, Ned's wife. So I can understand a lot of frustration that people have with this character. I've heard that people have a hard time relating to her, and I can definitely agree with that. But I think it's an interesting insight to a mother figure, and from what I hear from other people in the community, that a lot of the feelings that Catelyn have feel very real to, very relatable to people that are mothers or have these feelings towards other people who have families. And it's poignant because that's a lot of what Catelyn's story arc is about. Her connection to her family. She talks a lot about her Tully side, but she's dead set on being there for her family, which kind of sounds weird due to some of her actions in this book, but she spends a lot of time close to Bran, which of course is good because she wants to, after his fall, because she wants to take care of him. But through doing that, she starts to neglect some of her duties at Winterfell. She starts to neglect some of her duties to her other children, like Robb and Rickon. So it's very sad to see how devoted she is. So her devotion is kind of a double-edged sword for her, I think. And you're going to see that come up time and time and time again in her story arc. But I think that she's a very strong and realistic female figure in this universe, because she is treated like a woman by characters, but she knows how to work her way around. She knows how to talk to people. She knows, the nobility of the North, the nobility of the Riverlands. She's a controversial character, because a lot of the decisions that she makes I don't agree with, but I can definitely understand. Of course, the big one is kidnapping Tyrion in this. And of course, that's based on a lie by Littlefinger. And I understand that Catelyn and Littlefinger have a background, but you can't trust this dude. His name's Littlefinger. You can't trust him. There's that line where Littlefinger said that he fingered his beard, or he fingered his goatee. You can't trust a dude that does that. Anyways, that's a big thing that I criticize Catelyn about. How are you gonna kidnap Tyrion? And if, again, it's what I talked about earlier. It's this double-edged sword. It's the devotion to her family that leads her to believe in this lie in Littlefinger because of the background that she has with him. She trusts him. So she feels righteous in this decision to kidnap Tyrion, and what ends up happening? Gregor Clegane gets sent by Tywin to the Riverlands. And not only that, but of course he's going to send Amory Lorch to the Riverlands, and he's going to send the Bloody Mummers with Vargo Hoat, Qyburn, a few Dothraki, and they're just going to cause havoc. Like I said earlier, it really gets fucked during the War of the Five Kings. And it's kind of set off by this. And I can't blame Catelyn, because she consistently falls for lies that her devotion brings her to believe in. Because this all begins in Winterfell when she gets word that the Lannisters are involved in Jon Arryn's death. And this kicks everything off. It's a strange question to ask if the arrest of Tyrion, if the kidnapping of Tyrion is righteous or noble, or if it was a good decision in general. But overall, I'd say no. By the end of this book, Catelyn's going to be with Robb Stark, and they're, of course, going to want to raise their banners after the death of Ned. So overall, Catelyn, she gets a meh from me. I really do love reading her chapters. I love her point of view. But the decisions that she makes leads me to dislike her character. Especially the way that she treats Jon. That's one of the big things that leads me to dislike her. Of course, again, I can understand why she hates Jon, but I don't think it's justified in any way, shape, or form. Let's just say, TLDR, I respect Catelyn, but I don't necessarily like her. I don't think I would like her as a person if she was a real character. And next is Daenerys. And I don't know if I'll ruffle feathers here, but I really don't like Daenerys' chapters in these books, almost the whole series. And it's not her story arc. It kind of is. It's really boring for a long time. And I would say that almost all of the time spent with the Dothraki in book 1 is boring. And I don't think it's George's fault. I think it's good writing. I think it's interesting. It's just not for me. I don't think that the journey through ASOS will flip over here. Of course, we're going to start in Pentos with Daenerys. Let's start with a Game of Thrones. We're going to go to... Boom. Here, this is Daenerys' journey throughout book 1. And you'd think that a lot of it would be filled with a lot of interesting events and stuff, but a lot of it's actually spent with Dany learning about the Dothraki, learning about the past of Westeros, what's going on over there through Jorah, who actually is one of a character that I love and hate at the same time. He's a very interesting guy, and he's a big plus in a Daenerys chapter when he shows up for me. But overall, I think a lot of the journey is pretty boring. Of course, you start in Pentos. Her story begins with her marriage to Khal Drogo, a kind of, if you can think of like steppe warriors from like the steppes of Eurasia, that's kind of what these guys are based on, kind of Mongolian, kind of, warlord dudes. They have a very connected culture to horses and Mother Nature, and to nature in general, and of course combat. It's a very interesting people, and of course Daenerys is being sold to this call of this culture to become his wife, and in hopes to bring her brother Viserys Targaryen, of course, who I mentioned earlier, who were exiled at the end of Robert's rebellion from Dragonstone, which is this island over here. So Daenerys is being sold so Viserys can claim the Dothraki as a army and sail across the Narrow Sea to bring King's Landing under heel again, so he can rule the Seven Kingdoms as he believes he is the rightful king. But as a part of the agreement to become a true wife of Khal Drogo after the marriage, Daenerys must travel to Vaes Dothrak, which is kind of the capital city of the Dothraki, so she can meet the Dosh Khaleen. And of course, along the way, she becomes pregnant with Khal Drogo's child. And you learn along the way that she is going to, that the crones of the Dosh Khaleen believe that she is going to give birth to the stallion that mounts the world, which you learn is this great warrior who is supposed to come and ravage the world and bring it together and against a threat, which many people believe is the Others, which is an ancient story of when the Others were first defeated. We believe that this is the Dothraki version of that event. So the stallion who mounts the world is this version of the savior who's supposed to come again into this world and save everyone from this threat that is the Others, which of course we don't know that much about. They were only just introduced in the prologue, and we don't hear much about them for a very long time. Of course, Vaes Dothrak is a big highlight of Daenerys' story. Of course, I said there's not a lot to talk about that I enjoy about her story. Seeing Vaes Dothrak, a lot of the things that are there that the Dothraki have just brought back from a lot of their conquests is cool. You see a lot of things from different areas of Essos that you never get to go to, because this map right here is an interactive map. This is as far as Daenerys goes. There's more to this world, but this is as big as this map gets, because that's as far as Daenerys ever gets. She never goes further than the city of Karth, which is here between the gateway between the Jade Sea and the Summer Sea. So here, Daenerys eats that heart. If you watch the show, you'll know what I'm talking about. She eats the horse heart, so she can bless the child, so he can become the prince, or the stallion that mounts the world. And of course, by the end of the story, she ends up here at Lazarine Village, The Dothraki are here at the edge of the Red Waste. They're pillaging this village. They're killing people, raping people, and stuff. And for some reason, I seem to forget why, but one of Khal Drogo's warriors insults him, and they get into a fight. And Khal Drogo kills him and cuts off his braid. Of course, the braid is symbolic of your warrior, of like how strong of a warrior you are, because you don't cut your braid until you've lost the battle. And of course, Khal Drogo has a braid with a lot of bells in it because he's won many battles. He's a very great warrior. So he ends up fighting him. He cuts off his braid and he kills him, but he sustains a wound. And the wound starts to get infected. It starts to really affect how he is. So Daenerys takes someone from the village, and it's this kind of witch lady named Miri Mazdor. She takes her to try and heal Khal Drogo. And one thing that's interesting about this character is that she brings up somebody that doesn't show up until A Feast for Crows. And that's, of course, Maester Marwyn of the Citadel. And it's something that you really don't catch the first time that you go through. And then when you go back and look at this chapter, you're like, oh, wow, this is Marwyn, you know? This is Marwyn from the Citadel. Like, how the fuck did he meet Miri Mazdor, this witch that's all the way out at the edge of the Red Waste? You know, what the fuck is she doing out here? So Daenerys kind of takes her into employ, kind of trusting her to take care of Khal Drogo. Of course, this goes wrong. She ends up making him into a vegetable, and there's a question of if that's Daenerys' fault for going into the tent. I tend to believe that a little bit of the fault does go there, because the baby does come out fucked up. It comes out super screwed up. Khal Drogo ends up dead. Would he have lived otherwise? No, I don't think so. I think Khal Drogo would have died, Tony. Khal Drogo would have absolutely died. But I think it's kind of this is a turning point for Daenerys, because, you know, she makes the pyre for Khal Drogo, which of course is a lot more ornate in the books. You get a giant pyre full of everything. Baby would have been normal. Baby probably would have been normal, yeah, if she didn't go into the thing. I think the baby probably would have been normal. Because she ends up getting a vision of that in the books, and when she goes to Karth in the House of the Undying, you know, she gets this vision of a great warrior, this Dothraki warrior with white hair, with a long braid and bells. You know, he's a stallion who mounts the world. But of course, it never happens. He dies, like Khal Drogo dies. You know. Kind of sad, but it's whatever. So I don't know what else to say about Daenerys, because the end of her story is actually the most interesting thing that happens to her in this entire book. It's just the birth of the dragons. Like I said, most of her story is pretty boring to me. The birth of the dragons is definitely a shock, though, because it's the very end of the book. And like I mentioned earlier with Will in the prologue of the book, it's a story that starts with magic and completely gets rid of it for the entire book. You get nothing but political intrigue. Through the point of view characters, you get to see the world. There's a lot of world building. And you get influenced by that. You get bits and pieces of what the past was like. And then at the very end, you get hit with, boom, magic again. And it's something that's going to show up more and more gradually throughout the series. So that's something that I really liked about the first book. But overall, Daenerys is boring. So next is one of my favorite characters, and that's Tyrion. How could you talk about A Song of Ice and Fire and not bring up Tyrion? He's literally a fan favorite. He's George R.R. Martin's favorite character. So, Tyrion, of course, begins the story at... where is it? At Winterfell. Because he's here with King Robert's party to come visit Ned Stark. So Robert can come ask him to be Hand of the King. So, of course, he also begins his story at Winterfell. There's a lot to say about Tyrion, because his early character throughout the first 3 books is very interesting. Of course, people love him for like his witty banter. He's, of course, a very smart character. When he starts to come into power in A Clash of Kings, you really get to see, you know, the kind of moves that he'd make if he was a true leader. And I think that's something that people respect Tyrion for. Of course, one famous line from A Game of Thrones, which we can look up here. They didn't have a lot of magic in the show. Yeah, they got rid of a lot of the magic in the show. The directors themselves said that they wanted to tone it down for like a grand audience. And to be fair, there's not a ton of magic in the first book, but when it does start to show up more, it's definitely great to see. I'm gonna eat chips because I don't give a fuck on my own stream. We can look up this favorite fan quote on A Search of Ice and Fire, which you can always use to look up your favorite pieces from any book. So we can just look up like Tyrion stood, or Tyrion shadow tall. Yep, here it is. It's from A Game of Thrones John 1. So I'll read it out here. Some woman, no doubt. Most of them are. He favored John with a rueful grin. Remember this, boy. All dwarves may be bastards, yet not all bastards need be dwarfs. And with that he turned and sauntered back into the feast, whistling a tune. When he opened the door, the light from within threw his shadow clear across the yard, and for just a moment Tyrion Lannister stood tall as a king. That's a great moment. It really encapsulates Tyrion's character, because a lot of his the prose that he has makes him stand tall as a king. He has a lot of positive features, a lot of positive attitudes towards playing the game. Well, there's cons too, and we'll get into that with Tyrion, because he kind of fucks up with the peasants in King's Landing. He kind of fucks that over. I kind of believe that the riot at King's Landing is partly due to Tyrion not paying attention to the peasants. And of course that leads to a lot of destruction. It leads to the maiming and the tearing apart of the high septon of the church. Like, imagine that in real life. The Pope goes into a town and just gets ripped apart by people. And I partly blame Tyrion for it. He kind of screws over everything regarding the food supply in King's Landing. And I think he's a smart guy, but a lot of the decisions that he makes in Clash, which we'll get to later, is they're kind of self-serving in a sense. I do think a lot of them are good decisions. I think that he does make good decisions, but a lot of them are self-serving. But again, I think that quote about Tyrion standing tall as a king, his shadow, is awesome. It's one of my favorite things about Tyrion. Of course, you get a lot of advice in this bond, as most kings do. It's a metaphor, dude. It's bullshit. It's just writing. I can cast a large shadow. I just gotta put like my phone right behind me. Then kind of stand in front of it in a really dark room and like really far away. I have a huge ass shadow. You're throwing me off track now. Oh, things for themselves? Yeah, but I don't think Tyrion's fit to be king. He's supposed to be hand to the king. Like, even Tywin. I think Tywin's a terrible person, but he's a good hand. He knows how to get shit done. But he does it in kind of fucked up and questionable methods, but he knows how to get shit done. Tyrion does kind of fuck up with the King's Landing thing. He's a smart dude. I think he does make good decisions in King's Landing. Oh, you're good, dude. This is literally a freeform stream. I have an outline of literally just the characters, the POV characters. That's all I'm going off of. So, yeah. So, okay, to kind of breeze through Tyrion, we get some time spent at the wall. You know, they kind of ask him if he makes way to King's Landing to send some help because, you know, the Watch is kind of not doing that well. They don't have a lot of soldiers. There's like 18 castles on the wall, and there's like 3 of them that are manned. Most of them are in ruins, and there's nobody there. They're just completely abandoned. So the Watch is in a very sorry state by the time Tyrion and Jon get there early on in the book. And of course, Tyrion spends a little bit of time there. He comes back to Winterfell on his journey. We see that here. Tyrion goes up to Castle Black from Winterfell. He comes back down on the King's Road and comes here through... I don't know where this is for that. But he comes down through to the Crossroads Inn. And that's, of course, where he gets caught by Catelyn. They make their way through the high road. They get attacked by the bandits. You know, Tyrion and Bronn and them meet together. Marillion is there. And they make their way to the Eyrie to Lysa Arryn, who is Catelyn's sister. And this part of Tyrion's storyline is pretty boring. It's pretty boring in the show. I kind of, every time I go back to watch season 1, this part's pretty boring. So basically, Tyrion's being accused of taking the dagger, giving it to the cat's paw burglar who tries to kill Bran at the beginning of the story. And why does she do this? Because Littlefinger told her. It's so stupid. Like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Cat, there's a lot of decisions that I understand that she makes, but I don't necessarily agree with them. This is a very bad decision. And of course, this is the point where Tywin Lannister ends up sending all of his goons to go and rape the Riverlands. And it almost immediately begins after that. He's like, fuck it, you know what? They have my son. Of course, he says those exact lines later, but about Jaime. They have my son. So yeah, really bad decision by Cat. Of course, Tyrion demands trial by combat. Bronn stands up for him. Bronn wins. He's able to go home. He comes back through to the Crossroads Inn. And it's sad. Because what happened? Tywin Lannister hanged the lady that ran the Crossroads Inn. Why? For no reason. Just because when Catelyn took Tyrion, it happened in that building. So he said, fuck you. Fuck you, bitch. You allowed that to happen. I'm going to kill you. And it's really fucked up, and it's another thing that, you know, it's a consequence that happened to a normal person. You know, Varys ends up saying at some point, I believe it's to Ned Stark, he says, play your Game of Thrones. Yep, right here. Eddard 15. Let's see. The High Septon once told me that as we sin, so do we suffer. If that's true, Lord Eddard, tell me, why is it always the innocent who suffer the most? When you high lords play your Game of Thrones, ponder it if you would, while you wait upon the Queen. And share a thought for this as well. The next visitor who calls on you to bring you bread and cheese and milk of the poppy for your pain. Or he could bring you Sansa's head. So Varys brings it up right here. There's unintended consequences from the High Lords playing these games. You know, Catelyn taking Tyrion, even though she felt justified in doing it, ended up leading to the death of this innocent person. And you're going to see a lot of innocents die throughout this story. A lot of people that don't deserve death. And, you know, it just happens to them anyways because these High Lords are too busy, you know, playing about this throne. And that's kind of a main aspect of the entire series as a whole. You know, these High Lords are playing this game while this threat, this supernatural, kind of Lovecraftian threat from beyond the wall is amassing and coming in force. You know, we're going to end up seeing this, and there's going to be consequences for playing these games when there should be coordination between all these people in the kingdom. So from there, Tyrion gets sent back to King's Landing to act as hand for Tywin while he's fighting the war in the Riverlands. And one of the main reasons that he sends him there is because of the fucking dismissal of Sir Barristan Selmy, Sir Barristan the Bold from the Kingsguard. This is seen as an awful decision by Tywin, and he tells Tyrion, like, hey, you know, like, go to King's Landing and sort your sister out and sort that boy king out. You need to, like, go get shit settled. And it's interesting because it feels like Tywin actually does trust Tyrion with this task. And that's where Tyrion's story ends, is there. You know, he comes to King's Landing with leaders of the Mountain Clan that he brought with him, that he fought with in the battle that he fought in. I believe it's the Battle of the Green Fork or the Whispering Woods. Yeah, I believe it's the Green Fork. It's right here, right next to the crossroads. So, I believe that's the one that Tyrion participates in. And of course, his arc ends right there at King's Landing, becoming king, or Hand of the King. So who's next? None other than my favorite character, or one of my favorite characters. There's so many good characters in this book. Jon Snow. Of course, Jon Snow is steeped in a lot of mystery. There's a lot of questions to his true parentage. Of course, the show kind of almost confirmed that his parents are Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. His story begins here at Winterfell. You kind of get to understand his story by how he's treated at Winterfell. You know, he's a bastard, so he's kind of not treated too well, especially by Catelyn. Like I mentioned earlier, that's one aspect that I really don't like about Catelyn's character, is her treatment of Jon, which it goes back to that double-edged sword thing I talked about earlier, where I understand why she doesn't like Jon, in the same way, which kind of sounds screwed up, in the same way that I can understand a person hating, like, their stepchildren. It's fucked up, but, like, I can understand it. Like, you don't think that kid is yours. Like, that's not my kid. Like, fuck you. You know, you're like, you had a kid with someone else. That's not my kid. Fuck you. And it's screwed up. It's like an evil thing, and that's one thing I don't like about Catelyn. Especially because Jon exhibits a lot of the Stark look. That's something that's made very clear, is that he has a very poignant Stark look. He really looks like a Stark. Bran, Robb, Sansa, all three of them have the Tully look. You know, they have red hair. It's only Arya and Jon that have the Tully look, or the Stark look. They have black hair or like dark brown hair, and you know, Arya looks very similar to Lyanna, and Jon is very somber and very brooding, like a young Ned is kind of described. You know, he's described as a shy wolf by Sir Barristan, I believe. So of course Jon begins his story by having a conversation with his uncle Benjen, who is Ned's brother, who is a member of the Night's Watch. I do think one interesting thing about Jon is that he kind of joins the Night's Watch. Jon's a young man. He's about like 14 or 15. And he decides that he's going to join the Night's Watch, which is this lifelong vow. And he's drunk at a party at Winterfell. He's like, fuck it. Even Benjen's like, hey, are you sure about this? Like, are you sure you want to join the Night's Watch? He's like, yeah, I'm down. So, and of course he comes to end up learning and being very disappointed with what the Watch actually is when he ends up getting there. And it's actually Tyrion and a few other characters that he meets at Castle Black. Of course, like Donal Noy and a few of his friends. It's them that kind of make Jon realize and make like the bond that he can make with these other people. You know, he kind of starts to understand the vow, which is important in this book when he goes to make his vow with another character that he meets, who, of course, in any good fantasy story, you gotta have your Sam. Jon has his own Sam in Samwell Tarly, who he meets at Castle Black, who becomes a recruit after he gets there. So he does go to Castle Black after Jon becomes like a novice or a new recruit of the Watch. They kind of help him become a new man, which is good because his vows are going to immediately be tested in this very book when Ned is taken capture and eventually killed. And it's actually Maester Aemon that stops him from leaving. And he doesn't do it in a forceful way. He kind of just takes him aside and he tells him, you know, men have duty, you know. You have to understand the man. You have to choose, you know. Kill the boy and let the man be born, I believe he says. And he tells him his own background, what happened to his family, and how his own vows were tested. Does the book talk about how good Jon is supposed to be with a sword? With a bastard. Yeah, that's one of the main things they talk about, like in the show. Yeah, Jon doesn't realize he's, like I said, he's a very privileged guy, and he looks down on himself. That's one of the things that, you know, he's like, oh, people look down on me because I'm a bastard. Like, yeah, you're a bastard, but you have a better life than most people have. A lot of people that go to the Watch, you know, they're fucked. They're fucked for life. Yeah, some of them are criminals. They're you know, they're bad people. They're fucked. And Jon had this great life, and he's frustrated when he gets there. He's like, what the fuck is this? Who are these people? Why are they training so bad, you know? And he doesn't realize, you know, he had this very privileged life living as a son of Eddard Stark. So, yeah, that's something that's very poignant, and it's something that Jon grows through throughout this book. And it doesn't make it easy that the guy training them, Sir Alistair Thorne, is like this huge douchebag. He's just a... That's all he is throughout this whole series. He's just a ginormous douchebag. Of course, some of the minor characters, like Donal Noy is a character that I miss a lot. Of course, he goes away in A Storm of Swords. Which is sad, but he's one of the characters that teaches that lesson to Jon about, you know, you're very privileged. These boys lived a different life. Of course, I do believe that Jon made the right decision in this book to end up staying with the Watch, recognizing the danger of the Whites that try to attack Jeor Mormont. And I think the best thing about Jon's character is that a lot of his development comes from the people around him. He's really shaped by Jeor, Maester Aemon. He's shaped by Donal Noy. He's shaped by Samwell. He's shaped by his other friends. And he's even shaped by people like Sir Alistair Thorne, who hate him. You know, Sam is the one who kind of has to tell him when he gets appointed as, you know, steward to Jeor Mormont. Jon is pissed. He's like, what the fuck? I want to be a ranger. And it's Samwell who comes up to him. He's like, Jon, you don't realize Jeor likes you. He's trying to, you know, he's grooming you to be the next Lord Commander. He wants you to be the Lord Commander. You know, a conservative may say that, like, Jeor is a trans teacher and he's grooming Jon. Oh god, am I gonna get banned for that? Oh no. Anyways, yeah, Sam is the one that kind of brings Jon to realize, like, yeah, you're looking at things the wrong way. Where does Jon rank in swordsmanship to other royals in your opinion? I would love to see King Robert and Stark Young fighting. Which King Robert? Robb Stark? King Robb Stark or King Robb Baratheon? Young Robert Stark and young Jon fighting? Is that what you mean? I don't understand. Type again. Type something. I need to understand. Sorry, isn't Jon? Huh? Sorry, Jon? Huh? You're confusing me, Tony. Sorry, but to go back to your question, Tony, I think Jon's a pretty good swordsman. You know, he holds his own against Robb Stark and Jon B. LOL. I can't type. Oh yeah, I think they're pretty equally matched. Robb is described as a very good warrior. You know, he wins every battle that he's in the War of the Five Kings. And he says at one point, and of course, we can go to A Surge of Ice and Fire for that. I have won every battle. Let's see if this comes up. Yep. Robb Stark says it here in A Storm of Swords, Catelyn 4. Battles, murmured Robb as he led her out beneath the trees. I have won every battle, yet somehow I am losing the war. He's a great warrior, but he still feels like he's losing this war, and he's right. And to be fair, a lot of that is due to subterfuge by the Boltons and the Freys. So, John's story ends with J.R. Mormont learning about this threat north of the wall. And, John has to make the ultimate decision, you a boy or are you a man of the Night's Watch? And John makes the right decision, I think. And of course, we're going to get into the ranging beyond the wall and a Clash of Kings. But overall, I think that's all that I want to say about John for the time being. So we move on to the person who kind of truly begins the story when we start our true POV chapters. And that's Bran. And Bran's a very, very young boy. I believe he's like 6 or 7 when this story starts. And of course it starts on the execution of Garrett, who's a character from the prologue. It's pretty sad. It's kind of interesting to think about Bran's story in this book because he disappears for quite a while once he falls from the building early on when he catches Jaime and Cersei, going at it in Winterfell. And when he does come back in the POV chapters, it's through his dreams. And that's really when we get our first look at the Three-Eyed Raven and Brynden Rivers, Bloodraven himself, north of the wall. I think they show Bloodraven's cave on here, maybe? Anyways, Bloodraven's cave is as far, at least, as the Fist of the First Men. At least as far out there. But that's our first appearance of him. And, he gives Bran this dream of, Bran's flying above the world. And he sees everything. He sees Westeros. He sees Essos. He sees dragons. He sees, you don't see it on this map, but he sees Ashai by the Shadow, which is the furthest point of the known world at this point. And he sees everything, and he has to learn to fly. And whilst he's flying, he sees the destruction of everything else. The coming of the White Walkers and not the White Walkers, the destruction of other dreamers who've had this same dream, who weren't able to fly. He sees the destruction of all of them. Skeletons, children skeletons everywhere. Gross. But that's the first appearance that we get of Bloodraven. And it's pretty interesting. Of course, Bran mostly stays at Winterfell the entire time. He doesn't go anywhere. He recovers from his injuries and he spends time there. That's it. Eventually he's going to be left alone there after Robb heads south. Of course he's left alone there because Catelyn leaves to King's Landing towards the beginning of the book. So a lot of Bran's chapters have to deal with him thinking a lot about his injuries and how broken he is. And he's also dealing with these weird dreams that he's having, the awakening of these powers that he's going to eventually start to learn more about as he grows older, as he starts to make his journey north. But here he's only having dreams that are like bothering him. He's thinking a lot about, I'm Bran the Broken. People laugh at me. I'll never be a knight. I'll never be anything. He gets taken in by, or not taken in, he gets the saddle from Tyrion to help him ride, and they take in a group of wildlings that attack. Of course, this is Asha or Osha? Osha. Yeah, Asha Greyjoy is Theon's sister. Osha is the Asha. Osha is the wildling at Winterfell that they find. And they keep her there. They decide to keep her there. A lot of Bran's chapters have to do with Old Nan's stories, how he's feeling. He's talking to other people at Winterfell. So yeah, he's there by the end of the book. Not a lot to talk about with Bran. It's sort of the beginning. It's like the beginning in the Shire, in the Hobbit. You know, it's like him preparing and learning a lot for this big journey that he's about to take, or that he doesn't even know that he's going to be taking soon. Next, I'm going to try and be quick about, because I don't really like her that much, and that's Sansa. And I understand why people like Sansa. I just don't. I think a lot of the decisions that she makes are really bad. But like Catelyn, again, she's actually a very strong character, and a lot of the decisions that she makes feel very real. Like, if I was in that situation, I could see myself making the exact same decisions, even though they're really bad. Because a lot of people tend to forget, like, that Sansa's a very young girl. She's like 12 or 13. You know, she's making very bad decisions. Of course, the worst one is cluing in Cersei, Ned's plans to, like, kind of leave early and whatnot, and that ends up screwing up everything. It allows Cersei to mobilize, collect everything before Ned, probably make a deal with Littlefinger. You know, Littlefinger ends up betraying Ned. And a lot of this does come from this poor decision on Sansa's part, because she's smitten by Joffrey, and you know, she's a 12-year-old girl. She wants to be a princess. She wants to be the next queen. She wants to be with this handsome young boy that she's really into. You know, she's 12 years old. It's a very human decision, and I hate her for it, because it's a dumb decision. But I don't blame her, and I don't think she's stupid. Because a lot of the decisions that she makes throughout Clash and Storm, you start to understand that Sansa's really smart, and she makes a lot of really good decisions. She knows how to maneuver through this very dangerous situation that she's in King's Landing. Of course, there are more mistakes that are going to come along pretty soon, and we'll get more into that in the later books. But overall, I think Sansa's character is definitely marred by her decision to tell Cersei everything that was going on, which of course leads to Ned's death. You know, Sansa is the only one that's left in King's Landing by the end of the book, at least on the Stark side of things. Of course, Arya ends up escaping with Yoren, and we'll get into that, I guess, right now, because I don't really have much to say about Sansa. She ends up staying in the capital. She's having a really shitty time staying with Joffrey. She ends up seeing, you know, Sir Barristan Selmy getting taken away from the Kingsguard. She sees the execution of Ned firsthand. You know, by this point, she's still betrothed to Joffrey. So she kind of has to deal with this very evil boy. You know, he's very cruel to her. He has Sir Meryn Trant beat her. He has other members of the Kingsguard beat her. And we'll see later on in Clash that the only one to save her, or the only one to really protect her and take care of her, and that refuses to hit her, is the Hound. Even Ares Oakheart from Feast, even he, when you get his point of view, he regrets, you know, he feels soiled. He's a soiled knight. He feels disgusted with himself for laying hands on Sansa and for allowing that to happen. So Sansa, yeah, overall Sansa gets a thumbs down from me. Her story arc's very interesting to read. I actually surprisingly really enjoyed her chapters. She's just a frustrating person, which is a testament to George's writing. I dislike this character because she's so real that I'm like, no, why are you doing this? But I can understand why, but I'm like, why? No, like, why? So yeah, character I really dislike, but it's just a testament to how good the writing is, I believe. Arya is, of course, one of my favorite characters, again. There are so many characters in these books. You know, Arya exhibits a lot of characteristics of a Stark, specifically Lyanna Stark. You know, she's not into being a princess. You know, she doesn't like. She's not into the whole gender roles of this period. You know, she wants to fight. She wants to be adventurous. She's not interested in being a lady. She doesn't want to be married. Very reminiscent of Lyanna. And Ned sees it. A lot of people see it, and it's kind of a Stark characteristic. The Hound, of course, is going to be calling Arya She-Wolf later, based on her, based on her demeanor and her manner and her behavior. So we definitely understand the type of girl that Arya is. You know, she's definitely she's kind of a foil to Sansa, and that's why they come into a lot of conflict. One thing I forgot to bring up in Sansa's thing, and overall, were the direwolves, which of course Arya is going to be losing her direwolf. Sansa gets killed. Arya throws rocks at her direwolf to get it to go away. And one thing that I was really disappointed with in the show is that you don't see Nymeria like almost forever. There's like an Easter egg where you see her near the end of the show, but that's not true in the books. Like the books, she's growing one of the largest wolf packs seen on the continent in the Riverlands. You know, Arya's eventually going to be having her warging dreams through Nymeria, leading this great pack. You know, she kills some of the bloody mummers, and eventually, you know, she's going to be dragging Catelyn Stark's body out of the river after 3 days after the Red Wedding. And Arya is, you know, a first-hand witness to this. You know, she thinks it's a dream, but, you know, she's actually warging into Nymeria. Of course, at the beginning of the story, Arya gets Needle from Jon. The Needle's a very important item. Wait, what? Explain more. I thought her wolf was just gone. No, yeah, it just goes away in the show. In the books, it keeps growing a giant pack. You know, while the Riverlands are being screwed over by war, you know, villages being pillaged and stuff. You know, this wolf pack is just growing stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's unafraid of men and stuff. And while Arya's traveling through the Riverlands, she's having these wolf dreams through her. And, you know, Jon's going to be having wolf dreams through Ghost, and Bran's having wolf dreams through Summer. You know, all the Stark kids kind of start to have exhibit these warging abilities. Even Rob experiences them. You don't see them firsthand, but you see them through Catelyn's chapters, through Clash and Storm. Does it ever explain why? What do you mean, why? Why what? Why it... Why the direwolf just went away, or what? Or why they all have warging abilities? I think the Starks are just very in tune with the old gods. Oh, and one of the big things is that the Return of the Dragons at the end of the book. Why they have these connections? The direwolf is a sigil of House Stark. Starks are very, very old. They've been on the continent for a very, very long time. They have the blood of the first men. Green seers are common in the north. They don't happen in the south. There's 100% been green seer Starks before. Plus, their bond with the direwolf just increases their warging abilities. I'm sure that if there was a different animal, it happened just the same, but, you know, it's kind of symbolic that they found the direwolves. It's just writing. So, yeah. Arya, of course, a lot of her story involves, catching the cats at the Red Keep. She tries to catch this black cat named Balerion the Black Dread, of course, named after Aegon the Conqueror's dragon, Balerion the Black Dread. But this Balerion is just a cat, but he's very hard to catch. And he's kind of exhibiting some kind of hate towards the Lannisters, He kind of takes a chicken from Tywin Lannister at some point, I believe. I believe he snatches it from Tywin Lannister. He kind of screws around with the Lannisters a bit. So there's kind of a little hatred from this little cat. And of course it might come back around later if Arya comes back as a faceless man. Because who is Arya when she goes to Braavos? She is the cat of the canals. Of course, she's not an actual cat, but her warging abilities through Nymeria, if she's able to hone them, could she become a cat? Could she become a skin changer into Balerion? Could she pretend to be Balerion and go through the very tunnels that she learned to catch cats in to navigate her way to, say, like Cersei or Tommen or any of these people and assassinate them as a faceless man? I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there. What do I think? I think that... I think if anything, I think Arya needs to leave the House of Black and White, and she needs to further hone her abilities and understand the threat that's coming in the north. She needs to make her way back to her family, because Ned says it to her in the book. He says to her, we can look it up, the lone wolf dies alone. Yep, let me tell you something about wolves, child. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Summer is the time for squabbles. In winter we must protect one another, keep each other warm, share our strengths. So if you must hate Arya, hate those who would truly do us harm. Septa Mordain is a good woman, and Sansa is your sister. You may be as different as the sun and the moon, but the same blood flows through both of your hearts. You need her as she needs you, and I need both of you. God's help me. He sounded so tired that it made Arya sad. I don't hate Sansa, she told him. Not truly. It was only half a lie. So yeah, she needs to make her way back to her family. But if Red Wedding 2.0 happens, I'm down for it. I'm down for some bloodshed. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say about A Game of Thrones. And with that, this took way longer. I thought talking about the first book was going to take about 20 minutes. I'm an hour and 20 minutes into this stream. So I think that I'll just pick it up at a Clash of Kings at another time. So I rambled to 0 to 1 viewers for about an hour and 21 minutes. So it was pretty cool. So thanks for checking in, Tony, my one viewer. Let's go. All right. Later, dudes. Laterino.